Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the YBL podcast. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit here and join Megan and myself.
Hello.
Today is a very special episode because Megan works as a life coach. Her goal is to empower people to have meaningful relationships in life. That's right?
That's right.
All right, that's right. Beautiful. And as you know, with YBL, it is about all things life coaching, using tarot as a way through that. But this podcast is about inviting people onto the show to talk about their experiences of self-development and how they have become who they are, really. So let's get going. Megan, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to have you here.
That's good. That's good.
So the way that we start these conversations flowing is we have a tarot card deck. Megan's picked this out of my various piles of decks that I've been accumulating over the years, and she's gone for the Shimmering Veil by Silicon Way. We're going to shuffle the cards and just see what card comes out, and that's going to be the stimulus for our conversation.
Okay.
All right, we're going to riff from there, because that way we can bring in a bit of the universal energies into the chat.
Love it. Love it.
And we've got.
Have you shown them the back of the card as the? That's why I chose it, because I quite like that color.
She likes the
like
shimmering,
shimmery, pearly kind of color.
And the card that's come out is the Page of Earth.
Of Earth.
What do you think about this card, Megan?
Oh God, I don't know.
What's your intuitive response to it? There's no right or wrong answers.
I know. Let me think. I don't know. It's quite a scary card to me.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But then there's somebody holding like a bouquet of flowers as well, which is kind of quite a contrast. Something that's scary, but also someone that's doing something that would be like giving. I don't know. No,
I think that's a really accurate representation of what this card means. To me, the Page of Earth, it's about someone that's been on a life experience. They've been through a lot. Life has maybe felt unfair to them. They've been burnt a lot, but in that burning, like when I say burnt, I mean like come up against severe triggers, painful situations. But each time they've gone through it, they sort of overcome and stand back up, and they're ready to take on the new challenge, ready to step into the new paradigm of existence. So there's a lot of, I guess, ego death, shedding that happens with the Page of Earth.
Okay.
And then the bouquet of flowers that you mentioned is sort of this like, I've been through this, but I still want to give. I've grown from this lessons, and now I've learned that maybe I'm a healer, or that's the message that comes through with the Page of Earth.
You're literally telling my story.
No, yeah, that's
I feel like you are. I feel like that's a lot of healers' journeys, though, like to have gone through a lot of, I don't know if you want to call it trauma, but a lot of difficult, most people go through difficult stuff in their life, but it's like using that to then, I don't know, help yourself and also ultimately help others when you find ways through some of those more difficult things that blocked you for so long. It's like you have a very unique ability to help people in that similar situation to get through that stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. It makes me think about the path of the wounded healer. It's the archetype of the wounded healer. That notion that like we experience pain, but we do grow through it, and then within that we find our medicine. And then that's the gift that we get to bring back to people because we've had that experience, hopefully so that they don't have to go through it, or that we can guide them as they go through it.
I feel like that's more it, isn't it? I feel like it's kind of ironic because the things that hurt you the most, the things that you suffered through the most are often the things that you can utilize at the other end to help other people. And it's like your greatest, like, I guess, difficulties in life become your greatest assets in helping other people. So I do feel like it's about helping people through that. I don't think you can help people to avoid things. I think it's inevitable that people will have to go through certain things, but it's like you can make that journey a lot more pleasant, or certainly feel a lot more supported in that space.
I think it's important to sort of know that your therapist or your guide through your own experience kind of really understands what you're going through on an embodied level. So like this card resonates with me. I feel like I've been through just constant challenges. And you know, please God, no more to come. But
That's definitely something that you can't escape.
You can't escape it, but they arrive when you're ready to level up. I see them as a leveling up time. And then what that's meant is often the clients that come and work with me are people going through what I've just overcome. And therefore I can meet them on a whole new embodied sense of awareness. That's
definitely what I found with clients. It was like it was just a very specific experience to me around relationships that I invested so much. I mean, that was sort of, I guess relationships was my portal or my way into self-development work, because it was where I had so much pain. And I often think, you know, people enter the self-development work well in different ways, and it's usually where you're experiencing pain, and it all leads to the same kind of journey of like, how do you relate to yourself, and how do you learn how to emotionally regulate through difficult times and things like that. But mine was through relationships. I can't remember what I was saying. So where was I going?
Meeting clients and that embodied, having that experience.
So I guess that experience that I had through relationships ended up being how aware I was helping people, specifically people that were having that same pain point, because I knew exactly the things that they were thinking about themselves, the things that they were experiencing, the kind of stories that they were telling themselves about, you know, not being worthy of that relationship, not being good enough for this, that, and the other, and really just feeling like they were broken. And you can just help in such a different way when you've gone through it, I think, than somebody who doesn't really understand that journey of, you know, forever being single and forever not really understanding what that's about and why and how much they can do about it.
So like, I'm intrigued because the message that I sing through YBL is how people can arrive authentically and honor the truth. That I use the term the whispers of your soul. What is that saying to you? And so I have a few questions around that. So what was the moment that you were like, okay, now I know I need to be a life coach in this way? What was that defining moment where you were, what happened to you? Can you share that story?
I think, like all things, it's never one particular point, because it's an accumulation of like slow learnings in certain areas. I mean, I can look back to so many different points in my life where I started to realize certain things, but it didn't really, it's not like a one thing goes, okay, yes, now I get it, and I'm on the other side of like something. It's like a continual sort of journey. But I think when you look back many, many years, you can see all the growth that's happened. So there wasn't a particular point, but I feel like a lot of it had to do with a change in mindset. And it wasn't just telling myself, you know, I'm worthy, and telling myself, you know, that I can have a relationship that I want. And just to, I guess, go back into my history, I had basically never had a relationship all through my 20s, and it was the one thing I felt really insecure about. I would, you know, go on dates with people, and I would only be attracted to a very specific type of man, and that man would always ghost me within about 3 weeks, and that was the kind of recurring pattern. And I really believe our life happens in these kind of recurring patterns, and if you can start to understand them, that's when you can have the power to shift them. But I'd been going through that for like over a decade, and thinking, hang on a second, like there's something really wrong here. This isn't just coincidence that this is happening, that I'm not able to have this, you know, relationship that everybody else is having. So it was when I guess I first started acknowledging, okay, yes, I'm the common denominator, but I'm not broken. There must be something I can actually do about this and change this. I guess that's when I gave myself hope. And that was quite a pivotal moment, because it was kind of a recognition that I could do this with enough kind of persistence in the right direction. And it was doing that and just trusting the process with a lot of help from, you know, therapists. And, you know, I followed a lot of people on Instagram. I read a lot of things around it, and just trusting that process, and then practicing it even when I didn't want to, because there's a lot of not wanting to do the things that, you know, you have to do. Stuff started to change. And then it was like, when things change, then it proves to yourself, even if it's a small change, it proves that change can happen. And then that's when you start to believe, and that starts to change that mindset so that you actually believe it. It's not just a telling yourself thing, it's actually proving it to yourself.
Interesting.
And that's how you start to shift that mindset. And once that happens, new experiences start to happen, new belief sets start to kick in, and it's just sort of like a bit of a process that keeps rolling, if you know what I mean. And then you're looking back one day and going, hang on a second, I haven't dated one of those people in such a long time, or had one of those experiences in such a long time. And I was able to create the relationship that I ultimately had been looking for through doing this work. So I proved it to myself.
You proved it to yourself. That must have been such a good moment.
And then I guess and I was coaching people the whole time I was on this journey, even before I had that relationship. So it wasn't just I got the relationship so I could teach people. I knew the work that I was doing because I could feel it inside was changing me. And that's what I wanted to give back to people. I was like, I have to help all these people that I know are going through the same thing, because I'd been around so many women in particular who had shared the same experiences that I've been having to me at various points in my life. I just knew there were so many people that needed that help. So I was giving it back the moment I could, really.
The moment you got it in an embodied way. And it feels like a real gentle reprogramming journey, even though at times
it's not one thing.
It's not one thing. So there's this little tweaking. It is the quest to self, isn't it?
It's a quest. It isn't just to snap your things. And I would never say I'm healed. I would never say I'm like perfect now. None of that. It was just a very it was just I just followed a process and didn't give up even when it was difficult, and kept going even when I had setbacks, because it's never like on one side of it you're broken, on the other side of it you're fixed. It's like we're always, if we're just changing certain little things, we're just moving in that direction. And I'm still moving in that direction in many ways. I'm nowhere near perfect, and I don't expect to be.
I think this can be lifetimes of work, right? Lifetime.
That is life.
Yeah, it is.
That is life. Yeah. And that's what you realize, I think.
Yeah. And I think on that note, like, I'm always like considering that tightrope walk of like, it is life, and we have the choice to better ourselves and go, how at the end of the day to go, okay, where did I react or behave in an unconscious way? How can I make this conscious? How can I begin to reprogram myself? And you can reflect. But then also, like, I'm curious about also sometimes enough as you are is enough. But then if you get settled in as you are is enough, there's no change. So that's just what I sit with, is like, how do we love ourselves for where we are at on our journey, but also seek that journey of self-development, self-improvement. Because I think if you stop learning, then life for me loses its meaning. I always want to learn. Always. What's happening on this inner world? How can I free myself from this trigger or this trauma so I'm no longer carrying it? And how can I create that future, that relationship? But also, I can't give myself a hard time about it.
I think the thing is, you always, at the end of the day, you are always enough, irrespective of anything. You're always enough.
You are enough.
You're enough. You're like enough. And that has to be the underlying thing, so that if you are making mistakes or if you aren't doing things perfectly, you're still enough. And the idea is that you forgive yourself if you don't do things perfectly, but you are trying to better yourself in ways. And I think that's the balance. It's not like I'm enough. You don't say I'm enough and therefore everything I do, everybody else has to suck it up and deal with me being an absolute shithead or whatever it is. Like, it's not that. We're not saying that. If you really connect to yourself, you know those things that are troubling you, those things that are causing you pain, and it's like, that's the stuff that you need to bring to the surface and start to look at and own and take responsibility for, and look at, like, what are the patterns around that, and then consciously. And I think sometimes, I guess on my journey, I found it difficult to understand the difference between unconscious and conscious for a long time, because as far as I knew, like, I was conscious. What is this talk about unconscious and conscious? So I think if just to help anybody who doesn't maybe understand that, it's like the unconscious stuff, I guess, is all that stuff that's causing you pain, and just starting to, I guess, bring that to the surface and look at maybe certain behaviors or certain thought patterns that you're having that are around that and start to question them. Just I guess look at them objectively. And when you start to look at that objectively, that's sort of the conscious work. That's sort of looking at, okay, what objectively have I been saying to myself all these years? What objectively, and just starting to unpack maybe where that came from. And
why am I saying this?
Why am I saying that? And like, is it really true? I mean, one of the things that I always said to my clients is ask the question, is this really true? Because so often the stuff that we think is so factually true about ourselves is just a belief or a narrative we've been saying for many, many years. We've never questioned because we've never ever had any other thought process to the contrary. Like if you think, you know, I'm ugly, or I don't know, I'm just trying to think of this certain narrative. Unlovable, anything, like I'm not good at this, everybody else is smarter than me, whatever these sort of things are, it's like, is it really true? Start asking questions around that, and that's how we start to bring out the unconscious stuff and start to look at it from a conscious lens and start to separate the two things. And that's what people are often talking about when they're talking about unconscious and conscious, because the stuff that's unquestioned and goes unquestioned a lot is often ruling your life.
Absolutely. And that stuff, that unconscious stuff, is often associated, like it gets pushed back there because we haven't the emotional awareness or intelligence at the time of the traumatic event to process it with awareness, with love.
Yes, back when it was created.
So we create, it's a survival mechanism. I'm not dealing with that, pushing it in. And then, well, this is through a Jungian framework, and it probably comes into other frameworks too, but like that unconscious content has a autonomous influence over you. So you find yourself acting in ways almost like you're on autopilot, and then you're like, why do I keep recreating this? And so it's only by shining the light within, you know, actively using your consciousness, your awareness to turn within and go, oh, there's a whole well of experience back here that needs to be brought into the light. And that's integration. That's what I would define as doing the work.
Basically. And I don't think that ever ends.
No.
Because, you know, you might, and like for me, I healed a lot of stuff. I certainly brought a lot of the stuff around relationships up through doing this work, because that was where I was having so much pain, and just bringing that to the surface and just being able to say, I think I was always even just embarrassed to say I wanted a relationship. It was like, just to even say that was kind of embarrassing for me. There was some kind of like fear of like being seen as needy, or like, you know, like I needed a relationship. And so it was like bringing all of that stuff to the surface and just starting to really own what I wanted and really own, what was causing me so much pain. I just, I don't think that work ever ends. And whilst I've sort of managed to move through a lot of that stuff, there's so much stuff that still comes up and persists. And whether it's like, you know, questioning my abilities or questioning like how people perceive me in certain things, that stuff always comes up, and it's just about catching it when it does, and kind of giving it like space to be seen from another lens. I think
I agree. And it's curious, that, isn't it? Because there's so much rhetoric, I think, within the spiritual community, really, of you have to be whole or you have to be fulfilled, like to have a partner. And so like when you find yourself craving that intimacy or craving that love or that connection with somebody, the shame that's associated on you for, you know, you use the word needy for wanting that. And then in my experience, like some of the most powerful and transformative work that has come for me, like, I've sat on my own, I've, you know, existed in a single way, but then only you need a reflection, you need a mirror to like show you further into yourself. I believe.
I 100% believe this. I mean, and it's funny you say that, because my business was whole as one. Which with the idea being obviously that we don't want to seek ourselves in somebody else or seek our wholeness in somebody else. And I still do believe that. But I understand exactly what you're saying, because you can do, and I've often said this to clients before, you can do a whole lot of work on yourself, and I think that's great. But there's only so much you're going to be able to do without intimate relationship, because the intimate relationship is where you'll get severely triggered. We all get severely triggered in intimate relationship. It doesn't matter who you are. There are triggers there that come up that you won't be able to experience unless you're in that intimate relationship. So if you're, I'm going to do this work by myself and I'm not going to be in a relationship, that's fine. There's a lot you can do in that space, but it'll only take you so far. And if you then come into relationship, that stuff's all going to still be there. It's just going to get triggered once you're in that intimate relationship. And the only way to work through it is to work through it in that space where you're triggered. And that's like anything. You can't work through something without going through it. You can't just avoid it. And I do think a lot of people have that issue with avoidance, where their idea of working through it is to avoid it, and that's actually a false way of doing the work. That
feels regressive. That feels like what we hypothetically did as children to avoid our feelings because we weren't emotionally aware, or
it's difficult. It's confronting.
It's confronting.
The feelings are confronting.
Jung calls it confrontation with the unconscious.
Okay.
And it feels like that at times because you really have to confront yourself. You really have to look at yourself in a vulnerable way, and especially when you're seeing that being amplified by another half. And so, like, whilst I experience it as a confrontation, maybe sometimes I like to challenge that, because the way that I deal with my unconscious content is I go, okay, you're there, I acknowledge you, and I try to create within myself a loving platform for it to come out on. So it's not a confrontation, it's more of a welcoming or an acceptance. And that's taken time, and sometimes it's very much a confrontation, or I go through a process where I don't want to look at it, and then I'm like, okay, I'm listening, fine, I can hear you, I guess, but I think the word confrontation and doing the work can create a sense of difficulty around it. But actually, in my experience, it's so beautiful. That's the biggest act of self-love, is to go, oh, you're safe enough now within yourself to feel this, to understand it, to unpack it.
I think so too. And I think it's not, we can't always be doing the work. I think the thing is, like, it can be exhausting if you're like constantly trying to do the work, constantly trying to push yourself into these situations. It's exhausting. But I think if you can reframe it, and I definitely noticed this shift in myself, where I was almost like excited when I would get triggered, or excited when something would come up in me, like an emotion of like rejection, or an emotion of like whatever it was, because it allowed me to explore something new. It's like, yes, another thing for me to look at. And I think if you can reframe that and have that relationship with rejection, or have that relationship with those feelings as like, oh, this could be something for me to learn about myself, that creates more of a harmony into that work, rather than it being so scary and so terrifying. But again, you can't always be doing it. I mean, it's exhausting stuff, so it's just about doing it where you can in those moments.
And I suppose that, well, for me, I'd see that as my relationship with spirit or the universe. Like, in the moments where the work is necessary, I'm like, I've been guided here to do that now. This is the time for this work. And then there are moments where I'm like, oh, there's no work to be done, and it's peaceful, or and then I'm like, this is very strange territory. I don't know what it's like to exist in. And so, the gratitude that comes in that space after going, okay, like, the work isn't always necessary. It's fascinating. It's fascinating how we attract experiences that, if we approach them in the right way, bring about those changes.
Well, they have to. It's like it's inevitable. You can't. If you think about it, like, naturally, when we're younger, we avoid all these sort of situations and hard feelings and all that stuff. We naturally are doing that. So, for you to change that pattern, because that is a pattern that then will be created, and then you'll have that pattern later on in life. If you're then turning around and changing how you're reacting to that and going, oh, I'm going to turn towards it instead of away from it, you have to change. Like, things have to change. There's like, it's just logically, it has to change. Stuff has to change. Your brain chemistry has to change. Things in your brain and your perception of like yourself has to change, because you are showing up differently. You are doing things differently. And because of that, you're having different experiences that potentially can contradict these ideas you had about yourself before. And that is that self-love work. It's like putting yourself in those situations to better yourself, because you know it's the right thing to do for yourself, and to support yourself. And that's really that self-love journey as well.
So you just really got to question yourself, the experience,
Yeah.
get involved in it. And it's curious, isn't it? You use the word rejection, and I realized that
Oh yeah,
that's
the key one.
That's the key one. Because I realized that I recently had, I went on this huge journey. I went to this, I went to Buddhafield. For those of you that don't know, it's this Buddhist festival. Essentially, it's completely sober. Last week, I was volunteering in the teenagers tent, working with teenagers. And being around teens brought up a whole load of stuff for me. And on the journey of self-development, I've always been looking at inner child. Forgot how bloody traumatic being a teenager is.
I know.
And I realized that I was taking teenage Josh into my relationships. And teenage Josh experienced rejection on a massive scale and was angry about that. And I attended this this workshop. This festival is amazing, guys. Get tickets next time it's on, because there are workshops on everything at Buddhafield, from healing your inner child to awakening your sexual diva. I even like spun yarn.
Sexual diva.
Yeah, like there's like erotic dancing, there's conscious flirting, there's just like hundreds of different practitioners come every single year.
Wow. Okay.
And the work, once you've got your ticket, it's free.
Yeah.
But I even spun yarn, like, which I was really terrible at, and that was a really big lesson for my ego.
Okay.
All my friends were really good, like, and I was like, it kept breaking. Anyway, on the last day, there was this workshop about awakening your teenage dream. And I went there and I had all of this pain surface. My teenage self was really speaking to me. And so I approached it with this loving space. But my teenage self was so angry. Like all he could say to me was, where have you been? Where have you been? Where have you been? And there was 100 people in this workshop in a tent. Like, honestly, but to me felt a little bit like the Tri Wizard tournament. There's wizards everywhere. And witches. But 100 people in this tent, in this workshop. And it's the first time in my life I'd been in the presence of grown men and grown women, but like it's probably about 30% masculine energy, well, 33%, 66 feminine. And I heard men, like men crying. And I thought that was so powerful. It's the first time I've heard a man cry. And I think maybe it's probably the first time a lot of women had heard a lot of men crying.
Yeah.
And this one man behind me said something along the lines, his teenage self said to him, you've come so far. And I heard him sobbing. And then that set me off. But I realized that, you know, I'd experienced a lot of rejection and I've been carrying that. And so that was my unconscious programming. I was taking that into my relationships and I was assuming I would be rejected. And then I was creating that. I was the creator of rejection.
Yes.
And I had this beautiful experience where I got to run in the end dance. And I ended up meeting this woman that I just danced with. And she held that rejection for being received by another person for that space. And then the festival, like the workshop ended and I didn't see her again. But the beauty was I didn't need to see her again because I'd chosen myself in that. And I was witnessed being received by somebody in a dancey way. And
even just putting yourself in a situation like that is very confronting, would be confronting for a lot of people, I imagine. Like, and that means instead of turning away from that, you're walking towards that.
Yes. Yeah. So
it's very exposing.
It's so exposing, but it's exciting because it's like, as you were saying, it's like something has to change, right? And I was like, I don't need to be rejected anymore. Yeah. My whole association to rejection has shifted. And so there was like a huge transformation, like a magical moment in that. And I'm addicted to that feeling. Those epiphanies, you know,
having those moments. And changing that relationship to rejection is huge. I think we always take rejection so personally. We see that we automatically make it a story about ourselves. Like, this person has chosen not to be with us, therefore we are not good enough. Therefore we are not pretty enough. We are not smart enough, funny enough, you know, fill in the blank. And rejection is never a personal story. There's always like so many more aspects that come into it than that. And like, if you can, in those moments of rejection, like really zoom out and start to look at what those other aspects are, and really give yourself some grace in that, and stop being so personalized about looking at through such a personalized way, it can really relieve a lot of that rejection and make rejection a good thing,
Yeah.
because ultimately all rejection is the wrong thing is moving away from you. The thing that isn't right for you, whether it's in that moment or whatever, isn't right for you, and that's moving away. And so then it can actually become a thing that you do really enjoy, or that you do really love, because it's actually the things that aren't right are just clearing away, whether it's someone isn't wanting the relationship that you're wanting, and as long as you're showing up and asking for the relationship that you want, then them moving away from you, or that moving away from you, just means they weren't the right person for that relationship. It doesn't mean you're broken. But that's one that a lot of people I know struggle with, and that changing that relationship is huge with rejection. I definitely had an experience similar to when I was a lot younger. So when I was like 28, I went on my first ever like retreaty type thing, and I was told to do a workshop like this, and I'd never put myself in a situation like that before. And I had been dealing at the time with a lot of panic attacks and anxiety throughout my 20s, and it was a group work thing. And I was told, this is the workshop that everybody says you have to do. And I was a lot younger than most of the people there. Certainly hadn't had a lot of life experience or had been exposed to much self-work or anything like that. And we did this sort of mad dancing, and then which is just like really, again, it's like, oh my God, I feel so awkward and everything, but they make you do this mad dancing in this group with people that you don't know. And then at the end you had to like all hold hands and look into each other's eyes as a group, and people just started bawling, everybody, and like you say, men, women, all bawling. And I had a full-blown panic attack. I couldn't look at people in the eyes. I couldn't be in that space, and I left. I had to leave. I avoided it. And this looking back at it, I know why, because it brought up all my vulnerability, which is why I couldn't have relationships, or I was struggling to have relationships, because all of that vulnerability was tied in with rejection and all these ideas about myself, which was all linked to my panic attacks, which were another pain point for me. Had this full-on panic attack, ran away from the situation, left, and it was like a big realization for me, like, how are all these other people able to do this and be in this vulnerable space and cry? And I was just like a mess, like I couldn't be there. All of these feelings of vulnerability, which I kept shut down for so long, and they were suddenly being exposed in this moment, and I could feel them rising, and I was like, uh-oh, and then just panic attack, like full panic attack. Anyone who's ever had a panic attack, they know what I'm talking about. It's a very terrifying experience. So like that kind of work, I think, is great. It's great because it just can expose so much for you. Like, even if you have an experience like mine, and it's not exactly the experience of, like you did cry and you had that release and it was kumbaya, at least it highlights, okay, there's something here.
This is where there is
there's like an oppression or something that you're doing within yourself, that's causing the panic and causing the anxiety.
That's still like such an important part of your journey.
Absolutely. It's like pain is a part of it. It's not easy. The healing journey isn't easy. I think people think it's going to be rainbows and unicorns. Spiritual. And that's where like we call that spiritual bypass, where people think it's just all like lovely. And I think a lot of my clients that have come in thinking it's going to be lovely, they get the shock of their life, because it's not. Nothing about it is like rainbows and butterflies. It's not a quick fix. It's hard work, and it's often moving through and exposing yourself and all the deepest sort of like fears coming to the surface, and being prepared to look at them. And at the time when I was 28, I was not prepared to look at it. I was just running, but it showed it.
You have to be ready. You do have to be ready for it. But I found that, like,
you do.
I didn't have a choice. Like with my awakening, perpetual awakenings.
Yes.
The universe is like, right, now's the time.
Yeah.
And forces me, but then that's the path that I enjoy as well.
Yeah.
But it is painful. I had a really funny term around the spiritual bypassing, muck spirit. It's like the fast food of spirituality.
Okay.
It's like there's no sustenance or nutrients in a quick fix solution.
Yeah.
Like the spirit I'm observing within myself as well. I know the times where I try to bypass or put a glossy paint over it.
Yeah.
There's a power in addressing the rawness and the realness, and actually getting comfortable in the vulnerability of it. you know, what is it to be vulnerable and to be exposed? That is that is a terrifying space to be.
Especially if you're used to shutting that down and hiding that part of yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it's inevitable. I think anyone who has anxiety, I think that's a portal to like I said, this work. That anxiety is only, I mean, I don't know, people might disagree with me, but my experience of anxiety is like there's your true self that wants to be seen in all its authenticity. And then there's the narratives that you've learned about this true self, which is that this true self is shameful, or that these feelings that you have are shameful, or this person you are is shameful. And that's sort of working against each other. So it is like that movement that you do with your hands is a movement I always do, which is so interesting. It's this like self that wants to come up, and in moments of like exposure like that, it's like it's trying to come out, and these narratives are like we can't be seen, and then that just explodes, and that's when you get those panic attacks. Like I really believe anxiety sits in that experience of the two, like this true self and the learned self coming into a massive conflict. There's a dissonance there, like one is telling you one thing and one's telling you the other, and it's unlearning this stuff that's sitting at the top that's holding it down, and unlearning this, and or looking at where this stuff's come from, so you can start to dissolve it, so that true self can just sort of exist and be okay to be seen. Whether it's you know, for me it was crying, or for me it was being vulnerable with certain people, or being seen in that way. But like it can be anything. It can be so different for everybody what that thing is. Whether it's just being able to say no, no, I don't want to do that. You know, for some people it's that.
It is.
It's as simple as saying no.
Finding your no.
Yeah, finding your no.
To create your yes.
You know, just being able to like say, I don't want to do that, and not feeling that guilt and stuff. Because again, that guilt is this stuff. Guilt is like this narrative often, but when we act from this place, this is where we start to go wrong. That's how I sort of see it.
And all of this on the top is the unconscious programming, which is ironic because and it's the narratives that the ego create, right? I can't do this because of this, or this person has said this about me because of this, or what will society think if I do this? And then the soul just is like, for me, like it's the image of like a steam vent. It just wants to come up and reveal itself to you. And for me, the portal to my soul is through my heart. But if my heart is being blocked by my mind, then those are the layers. So I'm sort of building this analogy of like my head and my heart are on the way to learning how to be in cooperation. Sometimes our head needs to rationalize and create logic. And sometimes our heart is like the intuition, the feeling, the love. And like there's times where there can be a healthy debate, but when the two are stopping each other from achieving but my experience at the moment is like when I'm in a space of regulation, when there's a union of the two energies, I feel most in contact with my soul. That feels to create like a frequency that creates a portal for my soul to come through. And I have these experiences even at the moment, like I go dancing quite a lot. I do 5 rhythms and allow my body to express itself. And I close my eyes, and the visuals that come up at the moment, it's like really feels like a snake shedding its skin. Like I feel my soul dancing, and the body feels just, there's a new meeting with it. So there's a new lesson on the way whenever that happens. But those are the moments I'm in alignment. I'm on the right path. I can feel this energy, this flow. There's no stopping. There's no pushing down in this moment. And I think that's why people say you need to let go. It's not like physically letting go. It's about letting go of the thoughts that are stopping you.
That flow.
Because holding on to them, for me, and I think for many other people, that's the safety net. I know this reality.
Well, of
I
course.
know this narrative. It's safe. What is it to be in a new?
Safe is an interesting thing as well, because often we think like what can be seen as safe, it can often be destructive, right? So we think something we can find safety in patterns that are extremely destructive. So it's such an interesting it's such an interesting concept, because you'll see people who have like these certain patterns, that cause them to be really unhappy, have a lot of anxiety, have difficulty in relationships, whatever it is, difficulty at work, all of these things, and those patterns will repeat themselves over and over again, whether it's with friends, whatever it is, right? And we don't understand why it keeps happening to us. And the reason it keeps happening is because there is a safety in it, even though it's like really destructive, or there's something really destructive about it. Like, whether it's for me, with the relationship thing, it was always being attracted to, and this is a whole another topic, but being attracted to people who were really unavailable to me and really like not capable of having like a deep relationship. And there was an attraction there because there was a familiarity there. There was a safety there, because I'd done that pattern so many times before that like that felt good to me, even though it didn't feel good. Do you know what I mean? Like, it felt terrible.
You know how it's going to play out.
It felt terrible being rejected and having these, people need me all the time and feeling like I'm not good enough. That all felt terrible, but it was so safe and so comfortable, because that's what I'd been experiencing my whole life, and that started very young and carried through to my adult life. So I kept repeating those patterns. That word safe is so interesting, because it's safe and it's attractive, whether it's destructive or not, if you've been repeating it.
Why are we built like that? Like, why do we find safety in the chaos? I mean, obviously it's our conditioning and what we've grown up with and what we've experienced, and then you have to
no, you go.
I was gonna say, like, you have to address the fact, this isn't actually safe, this isn't actually healthy, but it's terrifying experiencing security, it's terrifying experiencing. I mean, this is attachment style theory, right? It's like,
but I was going to say something about the brain, because you're like, why do we do this? And there is like biology attached to it, which makes so much sense. The way I understand it is like your brain is just has evolved over like billions and billions of years to make us the most efficient possible at being able to survive. Like that's if you think about your brain as that is its purpose, and it is trying to help you survive, and it's found all these sort of ways and shortcuts to do that. A lot of it has to do with if you do something in a certain way to a certain stimulus and you survive it, it gets logged in your brain as this is the way that we do this thing, because we know that we survive at the end. So, and survival is quite literally like, life, death, right? So if you didn't die when you avoided, those feelings, or you behaved in this way to avoid this situation, whatever it is, and you survive that, your brain logs all of those things logs that, and then it's like, okay, so this is what we do to survive because we did it that way. It doesn't mean it's efficient, it doesn't mean it's the best way to do it, it's just the way that you learn how to survive the situation. And that's sort of what your brain's doing all the time. Now you can reprogram a lot of that stuff, but it takes conscious work, because that unconscious part of your brain is the part that's trying to like compute everything to help you to survive, and just doing things on autopilot. So you don't have to think about how am I going to respond to this situation. Your brain knows, because it knows how to survive it. We avoid this situation and we cry about this and we do this, and then we have a lot of self-hatred, and then that's the pattern, and we survive it. Yay. But it doesn't mean it's like effective, or that it makes you happy.
No. So we have to create the vision of the life we want. We have to, in essence, learn, reprogram ourselves, convince ourselves that we are worthy of a life that is where we are being guided towards. And then we have to do the work equally to create that.
I feel like the brain is very malleable. It can be reprogrammed, but it's very resistant to reprogramming. So that's what you've got to know, that your brain will always resist the changing of patterns, because it's scared that you may die if you do something different. And so quite literally it will try to stop you. And the way it stops you a lot of the times is feelings. So feelings of fear, feelings of like anxiety, those sorts of things. And then you usually have a story attached to that feeling, you to make sense of the feeling. And the story will usually be, oh no, I can't do this, or oh no, that's not a good idea to do because of X, Y, Z. And that will stop you from making the decision to change the program. So it's about leaning into those difficult emotions and pushing through them, and not believing the story that comes up around it.
And like, what always gets me through those moments is I'm scared. This means I can find my bravery.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the growth.
That is the growth. But that's hard to
painful.
lead into.
It's painful.
You've got to get used to like that feeling of walking towards the fear, walking towards the anxiety, and doing something different, and learning it's going to be okay. And through that learning, you will change that pattern. But it's hard, especially if you're just starting out.
Yeah, and that's it. It's just you got to be gentle. It takes time. Just all of it is just like a curiosity, isn't it? Curiosity for change. I don't know why I'm wanting to ask.
Okay.
But I'm interested. Have you got any books that you've read that have changed your life and you can recommend them to? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. We were talking about a book.
Yeah.
Before.
Yeah.
And I've already forgotten the name of it.
That was
Joe Dispenza.
Joe Dispenza. Yeah.
That was one of the first books that I read.
That's it. You're on your journey.
Yeah. It was breaking the habit of being yourself. And I think that was definitely one of my introductory books to this kind of work. But I mean, there's so many books that you can read, and books are funny in that you could read a book 10 times, and if you read it at like 10 different points in your life, you would get 10 completely different messages from it. So what was really eye-opening to me may not be eye-opening to somebody else, and other books will be eye-opening to other people depending on where you are. But that book was one of the ones that I read at the start of my journey, and I really enjoyed it because it did open and educate me a lot about the subconscious mind and some of the stuff I'm talking about now, about how your brain programs and things like that. And I think if you can understand that, it helps you have so much compassion for yourself and the situations you find yourself in. That's probably like a really good starting place.
Compassion is such a nice word.
Compassion, because you're actually programmed that way, and there's nothing you can do about it. So this isn't actually, you not being good enough. This isn't actually your fault per se, but it is your responsibility. You can empower yourself. You can be responsible. You can make that change. You are the only person you have full control over. What would the book be for you? Oh my goodness, thanks for flipping it. Well, you did it to me. The book that changed my life and set me on a powerful trajectory was Susan Jeffers' Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Okay. She talks exactly about a lot of what we've been saying. It's just like nothing is a waste of time. If the experience doesn't work out how you imagined it, it's just a redirection. It's an experience, and it's not for you. But go for it. If your soul's showing you, there's a lesson in it. And I've lived by that. And it's created experiences for me, some painful, some beautiful, but lessons. Also, there's two books by it's more about male psychology. I read Under Saturn's Sun, the hidden, it's called something like The Hidden Wounding of Men by James Hollis, and that is just masterful. It explained to me a lot about the secrets that all men exist with in their journey. And also Iron John by Robert Bly, who's this poet, and they sort of founded this men's movement because they sort of realized that men don't have an example of a positive male role model. There's no one to teach them how to be. And like that's kind of my goal, is to become that. When I have my children, I want to be the integrated man. I want to teach, if I have a son and a daughter, I want to show there's a healthy experience of masculinity. I think the world needs a lot of that right now. If I'm honest, I feel like that's where this work needs to be directed, because I feel like a lot of men, straight men in particular, struggle to get to this place because it's so shameful. I think there's so much shame around it. So like the men in my life, a lot of them wouldn't look to a therapist, wouldn't look to a life coach, anything like that. And it's, you got to ask the question, like, why is it so much easier for a woman to do that? And why is it so much easier for them, and why is it so hard for men to ask for help in that space? So I think it's much needed.
and it boils down to the frequencies of the inner. So the inner, there's a wounded masculine and a wounded feminine. And like, so for me, the work is like, I find it easier to create sort of those as like umbrella categories for certain experiences within myself. Then I can go, the part of me that is needy, like what is that within my wounded masculine or my wounded feminine? And by finding what energy I can apply to it, it just really helps. Because I think for me, the idea of like, to go back to the word whole, is to have an integrated masculine energy within myself and an integrated feminine. And that comes from taking on the shadow versions.
Okay.
And I think a lot of men are operating in the shadow masculine.
Okay.
Which is perceived as like the ruling patriarchy, the possessive, the dominating.
Okay.
But then the healthy masculine is like the nurturing, the provider.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't be shamed or taken away from them. Women are capable of that too, but I think for a lot of men that is an important part of they need to do that to feel like they're living meaningful lives.
Yeah. So I have I have a funny relationship with this idea of masculine and feminine energy and stuff. And I know like, you understand it in a certain way. So I'd like to know more, because I always feel like, should these qualities be seen as masculine / feminine? Are there certain things that why are we attributing something to masculine? Why are we attributing stuff to feminine? Can't they just be aspects of humanity and aspects of who you are? Do we have to have that kind of binary? That would be my question to you around that, because I have I've struggled to get on board with that, because I feel like it then sends this kind of message of one thing is to be feminine, one thing is to be masculine, whether that's
well, I don't think it's binary necessarily. I think the two dance, and I see it as a sacred dance on an inner. So I think no matter where you align on the spectrum, that's your journey, right? Of your own gender identity. That's right. For me, I seek harmony of the two. So I identify as a man.
Yeah.
But that journey for me to feel complete is to understand the feminine energies within myself and the masculine energies. But
so give me an example.
But that's so, for example, I haven't had that much of an experience of positive male role models to show me what that is. So I'm still figuring that out for myself. But the challenges that I've come up with is like speaking like, if you look at a penis is like out. Its nature is to be penetrative, to be forceful, and this is what James Hollis and Roy Bly talk about a lot. But for me, my big wound was feeling brave enough to be out in the world, to be that forceful. I am Josh. This is me.
Okay.
So I associate that for me as a masculine energy, that assertive person with drive that can step out, can achieve. I use that masculine energy to take me into the world.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that like some people might, I think those qualities exist within, if we're talking generally feminine, but I think it's capable within everything. But for me, I have found it healing giving it a term so that it contains me within the remits of the work that I'm doing. But also that energy is what gives me the strength to go within. I use like an integrated warrior energy. Thank God I'm not required to enter into a combat zone. I'd struggle with that. But when I'm doing the confrontation with self, I see that as the warrior that takes me in there. And then I use the feminine as the umbrella term of that, the nurturing, the compassionate, the intuitive, the caring, to take care of myself. So as my masculine goes in, it's like because of the strength of the feminine to give me that. So she provide that within me provides that container to, so the two are working together. There's a union of the energies, and sometimes the feminine is like needs to be like it's the intuitive that gives, this is the action that needs to be made. So whether that's masculine or feminine, it doesn't matter to me. It just is. But I think to clarify, I find I find having the identifier helpful for me.
For you to like make sense of like where it comes from.
Yes, exactly.
In terms of like where you've learned certain things.
Exactly. From. I believe that like whatever job you like. I believe in equality. I believe in all of that. I just see the names as containers for
more like, so where you've learned, tell me if I'm understanding, more like where you've learned it from, like, so if you've learned a lot of that nurturing and a lot of those kind of intuitive like sides of yourself, you've learned that more from like the females in your life.
I mean, I've got such caring women. Exactly.
So you have more that you identify those more with the feminine, in how you, I guess, understand them. Like that's I guess that's my question around it, because I've always struggled with it a little bit, because I worry that because it's framed in that way, it's like you can only be a real woman or only be a real man if you have these kind of aspects of yourself in a certain way. I really think I try to focus on it more in terms of the thing. So if we're talking about intuition, or we're talking about nurturing, or talking about caring, just talking about that generally as something that a well-rounded human being needs to understand and embody. And if they're lacking that, then that's something they might want to work on. Conversely, if you kind of lack the ability to make yourself known, if you sort of shy back a lot and you don't advocate for yourself, like that's something I'd want to work on with them, irrespective of male or female. Like if someone's lacking that kind of ability to say no, that ability to have boundaries, and that's another topical conversation, but like that ability to like really stand true to who you are, even when you've got a lot of triggers around you or a lot of forces around you that might make you want to pull inwards. Like if that's something you need to work on, that's something I would like want people to work on. But I would never assign masculine and feminine to it, and maybe that's purely me, but I guess that's why I wanted to ask, like, where that comes from.
I think that everybody has their own journey with it, and for me there's a subtlety of experience that I don't think I can even explain. I know when I'm in my feminine, and I know when I'm in my masculine, and I know when one's out of alignment, and I know when one's in alignment.
But you're still defining them as
I'm still defining them because there is a difference. And again, where I feel comfortable on the spectrum will be different to where you feel comfortable. But I don't want to discredit the fact that there is a difference. I think that there is, and they both have strengths and they both have weaknesses. And even like you look at how flowers pollinate, and you just that there is masculine and feminine energies. Gender aside, there are. I believe.
So that it's almost like a definition of like how those certain aspects feel to you, like, because if I'm trying to look at like say something like intuition or something like that, or caring, it has a very different energy feel to something where you have to stand in a room and speak up or something. It's a different energy.
It's a different energy, but it's not necessarily binary, because sometimes I love feeling like a caring, nurturing man. And I sometimes feel so in my masculine, the idea of holding a baby in my arm as a father and loving father. But to get to the point of accepting that, I've had to understand the feminine in order to allow it to integrate and work seamlessly with the masculine. So the two, they mesh, or they separate and they flow. It's a dance. And that, I think that's where the debate in society is it's become very like, you are this, but also you're not this, and everything is like different but the same, and there's all these labels. But
this is where I think
it's a headache.
Confusing.
It's a headache. Whereas actually, if we understand that we are blessed with this beautiful various experiences and spectrums, and we can choose and lean into any of those and enjoy those parts of ourselves, love them. So I think that's what's happening is people are putting themselves in camps and not saying, energy flows. This is the energy that's here. That's my experience. Too many boxes.
I know, and you see a lot of it on Instagram.
Time. How are we doing?
What are we doing for time?
Oh, we're good. We're good. Yeah, let's begin winding down. And I just kick the tarot cards everywhere. Like I see them like that. My goal is to find the union of it within myself, and I want to see that reflected in the world. I don't want to see them working against each other. I don't want to see one shaming the other. I don't like
it's too much of that. And like even like attachment theory is a really good example of this. Has been like weaponized in internet kind of therapy culture, and I hate it. It's awful. It's this, you get this real people identifying with these boxes that, I mean, it's a theory for a reason. It's like to give you an understanding generally of like understanding your attachment, how you attach to people, and what's happening, I guess, in that on the internet is people are identifying with a box, and then they're sort of standing from that box and pointing at the other box saying that you're broken, you're wrong, you're broken, you're wrong,
broken, you're broken.
And it's a horrible place to be, and I think that's what's wrong with a lot of society at the moment.
What would it be if people took that finger and went, okay, I can be responsible for this. You get on with what you need to do. Like if you want to accuse or blame people of being whatever, fine. There is a place for protest and all of this, but really, like, start with yourself.
And also just get rid, like use
Mm-hmm.
the theories and use all these things to understand yourself, but don't identify with a box. You are not a box, and you are never going to be.
Exactly.
And attachment theory is a good one, because people will say, I'm an anxiously attached person, therefore XYZ, and it's like, no one is just anxiously attached, full stop. Like we all have both aspects. Anxious and avoidant, as we talked about before. Avoidance behavior comes up in various parts of our lives. Like we all have like all of those nuances. You can't sit in one box. You can't. And it's like, this is that masculine feminine thing's another one where, there's a lot of that going around where people are, she's not in her feminine, she's not, like all this sort of stuff. It's so not helpful. I think it's not helpful.
As long as he loves himself.
None of this stuff's helpful.
But in order to fully love yourself, you have to look at the components of yourself that you are rejecting and you do not love. And it's not just that those have the unconscious influence over you. You project that onto other people. I think it's Buddhist philosophy that, like, I really align with it, is in order to have peace in this world, we have to find peace within.
Absolutely. Well, it's the same with relationships as well. I mean, you can't have, and that's a misconception. People think, I want to find this great relationship, I want to find this right person, and there's all this journey of like outwardly trying to find this perfect person, instead of saying, how do I like become somebody that's going to be able to have this deep, great, wonderful relationship that I want to have, and creating that within yourself, so that when that person shows up, you don't just walk past them because you don't see it, or you're able to attract them in because you are that person that is offering that type of relationship. I think that's such a common thing that I see in clients that I work with, where there's just this, I need to find this right person. Like, I'm not gonna look at myself. I'm good. I need to find this right person.
And everyone.
And then that person's broken, they're avoidant, that's why this didn't work out. And there's no like accountability of like the part that you took in that.
It's like, come out when you're ready, come out of victimhood, empower yourself. And it's that cliche, be the change you want to see in the world. Become that.
Totally.
It's transformation, and it is beautiful.
And there are always two people in it. There's always two people, two sides. So it's never just your fault, and it's never just their fault. There is like, but the work, I guess, that you can do and that you can take accountability for is your own. Don't try to hold someone else to account, which is what people spend all their time doing. Just try to hold yourself to account for the stuff that you can control. And that's all you need to do to move forward from that. I think if you're doing anything where you're just trying to constantly hold other people to account, you're not doing the work. You're kind of avoiding it.
I think that's a beautiful note to begin wrapping up, Megan. Thank you so much. There's been so much insight that's come out, and I think it's going to be really helpful for people watching.
And also with this card.
Started with the page of Earth. I'm wondering if people want to contact you, is there a way that they can? Are you open at the moment, or what's the remits on that?
Well, I'm currently on a bit of a break.
Okay,
so I'm not taking clients at the moment, but they're, oh my gosh, I mean, I love talking about this stuff. And if people desperately do want to get in contact with me and find out when I am available, I guess they can email me.
Okay.
Can we leave the email?
We can leave the email in the description.
If
you're happy with that,
That's fine. I work online as well. I can do that.
Great. Cool, because you have a beautiful mind and you bring a lot of gold to every conversation we've had. So really, really grateful. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do give this video a like, a subscribe, and comment. We've covered so much in this. So let us know your thoughts. So much love, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye.